Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
Thank you for staying with us, folks. Later on, we'll be speaking with Craig Hulet, who's a law enforcement consultant, military, security, terrorism expert. Does it all. He told us a long time ago that these riots that we see happening are all leading up to a civil war. We'll ask him if they're still on that page. We've got Craig Hulet with us, and you may recall Craig first came on the scene back in 92. He went on the Arsenio Hall show and explained what was going on during the 92 riots in L.A. Craig, you're on with Dick Gregory. Good morning.
Good morning.
God bless you, my brother. Peace and love, and thank you for what you're putting out here.
Yeah, and thank you as well. I've been a fan of yours. I hate that word fan, but I would put it differently. I would like to be able to at least say I've been a friend of yours secretly for a very long time.
See, fan is a Latin word. It means fanatic. That's why they be so crazy. I've never explained to my brain why you can win a football championship or you can win a hockey championship and your fans go out and ride. They ride because you won. You know? But just thank you, brother. Thank you.
Craig, you've been saying that you know, what we're seeing now is what we saw back in 92 in the L.A. riots. You still on that page?
I think so, yes. I don't think
anything with a different technology, Craig, with a different technology. They got stuff now they didn't have back then.
We've got the internet, we've got, but you know, there's a lot more that we haven't seen yet. You know, there's now a Pentagon page that I keep a close track of. Defense One is the page, and they're talking about new systems of nonviolent riot control that are pretty bloody hideous if they ever start utilizing them. And because of Ferguson, they are now talking about utilizing them, where they've only utilized them in places like Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. Right. Yes. So we're gonna see an uptick in the return for any kind of civil disturbances in America, where the Pentagon's technology is going to be introduced, maybe with military personnel behind it.
Tell us about this new technology you say they're going to roll out on these protesters.
Well, one of the things we do around here is we stay up to date on the new technology that's in the Pentagon, mostly used in foreign wars, but a lot of the new technology is directed at civil disturbances because the laws are changing here domestically. One important memorandum that we published a couple of months ago is a memorandum that if the Sheriff's Department can't handle a situation of civil disturbance in its county, the nearest military commander at a federal military installation has the right to intervene and take over control of that area, that region, and basically dismiss the Sheriff's Department and take complete control of it. In that regard, the Pentagon's developed over the years nonviolent technologies, non-lethal technologies to be used for civil disturbances, where they've only introduced them in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of them are electromagnetic. Some of them are chemical compounds that are almost like super glue. They'll spray you with this material that once it gets on you, it immediately solidifies and you can't move. And without the treatment to have it removed, you're stuck in whatever position you're in. There's also a new one that they refer to as euphemistically the stink bomb. It's basically they'll douse you with the equivalent of a skunk. So I think we're going to see these kinds of things introduced as not only is the police becoming more and more militarized, that actually is a function of the federal government. Everybody's arguing, I think wrongly, that the sheriff's departments and police departments, while it's true they're getting the equipment free, the equipment is being offered to them free. There's an effort on the part of the federal government, even under Obama, to militarize local law enforcement and to make law enforcement part of Homeland Security through their fusion centers. And a fusion center is a center in every metropolitan area, including rural areas over a larger expanse of land. Fusion center houses CIA, DEA, Homeland Security, Customs, Border Patrol. There's an agent from every agency in there, as well as local law enforcement. And When I say fusion, I mean literally a fusion where federal government is directly involved in domestic law enforcement, right down to surveillance with drones, surveillance, human intelligence, everything that you would see by an occupying army if we were to invade, say, Russia, they're doing domestically here in the United States. We have a standing army that Jefferson spoke of that was the greatest threat to this republic. It already exists. It's Homeland Security. Posse Comitatus is a dead act. It is no longer the law of the land. The Supreme Court supports all of these efforts. It's never been addressed at the Supreme Court, never will be. And as far as race relations, I don't think you've seen anything yet as far as how bad it's going to get.
Wow.
Because nothing's changed.
In 92, you, as I mentioned, you were on Arsenio, and you explained what was going on during and after the L.A. riots, which had its 23rd anniversary, by the way, yesterday. How do you compare what was going on in places like Ferguson and Baltimore to what was going on back in 92 in L.A.?
Well, the anger and frustration is now, 1,000 times greater because, I'll repeat, nothing has changed. I don't think the white community has changed. I think people that were tolerant, that were white, or in my case, men like me would come out and we would, if necessary, we would be physically on the ground, and if necessary, we were prepared to get physical if it became necessary to support human rights, blacks, Hispanics. I don't care. Yeah, and even gays, yes. The problem is that men like me, well, at least my colleagues, we're all getting old and dying. I'm kind of like turning into James Gammon around here. I just sound like a cracked old bean to some people. But I don't see men like me being replaced in the white community, and I don't know what's happening that well in the black community. I don't know if we still have the potential of a Martin Luther King and a Medgar Evers and a Nelson Mandela. I don't know if domestically the black community can any longer defend itself the way it did during the L.A. riots. I think what happened in Ferguson, it had to take a pretty bloody, ugly shooting to bring them out. And I heard things on the street that, some blacks said, white people, stand back and get your faces out of the camera. We don't need you. Well, I think that's very wrong. I think we all need each other, blacks, whites, Hispanics. We all need each other against what's coming, because this hasn't got anything. What's happening domestically here on American soil has very little to do with human rights or race relations or anything like that. This is about power emanating from a corporate regime inside Washington that wants to have absolute control over every living soul here domestically, and they will do whatever it takes. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House. In fact, we could have a vacant White House, and nothing would change. We could get rid of presidents in America, and still nothing would change, because we got 535 civilian contractors that call themselves congressmen and senators who are nothing but civilian contractors for the same corporation that is invading Africa, Middle East, North Africa, the same corporations that are putting it in peril every human being in foreign nations, wherever our Pentagon footstep is. That same corporate empire has its face turned Janus-faced. It has a second face turned here domestically. And it hasn't even gotten started yet.
Wow. Craig, some people claim that this country's heading towards another civil war. Do you agree?
I think there's going to be more uprisings like Ferguson for local issues, but I think the biggest bang I think that's going to hit this country domestically is going to be something like a bank bail-in. They're never going to bail out banks again the way they did. The government's not going to be participating in a bailout. IMF, OECD, World Bank, Bank for International Settlements have all been talking and issuing declarations about bail-ins. That basically means if there's an economic catastrophe again in this country and the banking system gets in trouble, they will simply go into depositors' funds, pension funds, savings accounts, CDs, and just take 10, 20, 30% right off the top because it's their money, bail the banks out, and you'll do without. And there's nothing we can do about this. This is now the law of the land, and nobody cares domestically what happens to the human beings here domestically any more than we care what happens to them in the Middle East. I'm saying this to make sure you understand. It doesn't matter that Obama's in the White House, and it never mattered that he was black. It doesn't matter if it's Jeb Bush or Hillary Clinton. We've got an oligarchy, period.
Before we left, I was asking about, some people are saying, Craig, painted the picture that all these disturbances of Ferguson and the one we're having right now in Baltimore, they're just adding up to a sort of conflict that's going to take place, and then they'll have to come in and declare martial law or suspend the Constitution and stuff like that. It goes all that far. I just want to know if your research has shown that, or if you believe that could happen.
Well, the Constitution has already kind of been suspended. The most important fundamental rights have already been violated. The only one right in the Bill of Rights was the third, that they haven't completely obliterated in some piece of legislation or Supreme Court ruling, and that's the one where they can house soldiers. But the Supreme Court did just rule that maybe we can't house soldiers in your home without your permission, but we can certainly house a SWAT team in your home without your permission because they're not soldiers, so it doesn't violate the Third Amendment. So in a way, pretty much the Bill of Rights is history as a fundamental document that's practiced at the federal level. So, martial law is barely a step further than where we're at already. It's just a question of whether or not the government chooses to act or allows local authorities to contain whatever it is they need to contain. Something fundamentally changed when Dianne Feinstein, almost 20 years ago, changed the language in the Senate bill in regards to FEMA and its activities. She added language that is language out of the CIA manual. It's called all hazards. FEMA doesn't just address atomic warfare, nuclear, natural disasters, floods, tornadoes any longer. They have an all hazards mission. And that was a CIA term. A lot of CIA terms end up in other areas of our governance, and we have to pay attention to them and go back and look into the law, and because the law usually will define what all hazards means. And the all hazards approach for FEMA, the CIA, the Pentagon, everywhere that it matters, including domestically, includes now civil disturbances or a man-made event. Civil disturbances or man-made event are now part of the mandate of the federal government. So posse comitatus is simply wiped out. That 1878 law that made it illegal for the federal government to use military personnel or federal personnel domestically in a law enforcement role. That's been history for 20 years. There hasn't been a riot where special forces teams are not on the ground at the scene. You don't see them because they're in civilian clothes. They look like deputies in plain clothes. They're not. They're special forces. Sometimes they're CIA. There's always a few DEA. But, special forces from the military play a very big role in SWAT training, surveillance training, arrest, seizures. They're there. I know they're there because I've been a consultant for 25 years to ATF&E. Ruby Ridge, Waco, special forces personnel were on the ground in civilian clothes. Green Berets. So don't think that the country is what you think it is any longer. You have to learn. We all have to learn what I've had to learn over the last 35 years. The change takes place. It's a paradigm shift. But like a paradigm shift, you don't feel it. It's like an earthquake, but it's tectonic. It's under the plates of the earth. There's a major shift taking place, but it's so subtle you don't feel it. But it's a paradigm shift, nevertheless. America is not America any longer. However you used to define it, you will either learn to define it differently or you will be made to look stupid and silly when things start happening. I almost said something else starts happening, which I've made this mistake a few times on radio shows lately for some reason. One of those 11 words, I think it is. when things start happening, you're going to be shocked to see the response
from the government.
From the government. You're going to think they can't do that. That's illegal. You're going to go back and there'll be people, with cowboy hats on saying the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. You're all just too far behind in what's taking place. This is no longer America. It has a name. Recently, Tom over at Tom Dispatch, Tom Englehart, wrote a long article. I mentioned it on your show recently, where he questions the veracity of how we define what's going on, what kind of a government we now have. And he was kind of asking his readers to, let's talk about this and find out what the design is. What are we supposed to call this new regime in power? And it's had a name for 30 years. It's a global regime of economic interdependence. It's a corporate empire. Its ideology is corporatism. And make no mistake, there is no more totalitarian regime on earth than a major monopoly corporation. Wow. There's no power greater on earth than that corporate power. If you've never been around it or lived within it or had it as a source of your client base and your income, how they behave, how a corporation behaves, is absolutely hideous. If you've never experienced, you're going to.
I guess this is why the banks can't fail. They're that corporate structure too.
Exactly. They'll never fail. It's not because they're too big to fail. That's just language that came out of the Federal Reserve to explain what was taking place. But it wasn't a policy of any sort. It was an understanding. It was a given. It was an axiom. It was something everybody in banking knew. Chase will never fail. They'll kill every American and steal all your money before Chase Bank will be allowed to fail. You don't understand. Muammar Gaddafi was removed, some people would say, for one single reason, is he canceled a $1 billion contract with Bechtel. That would be George Shultz's Bechtel, Stephen Bechtel, the wealthiest single individual in a corporation that's not traded on the exchange. You don't mess with men that are billionaires. You don't mess with their reputation, and you don't mess with their money. They run the government. They own the White House. They own it with Obama. They owned it with George Bush. They own it with Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton. And if you think Hillary's going to make any difference because she has, can I say it, a vagina, you think that's a difference for you gay, lesbian people out there wanting to elect her? I'm telling you, she's as big a tyrant and as vicious a leader as you will ever see in a male counterpart. How do you think she trained up?
So basically, what you're saying, if we trade Hillary for Obama, it won't be any difference.
It'll be worse because she'll have the backing of a vast majority of ignorant Americans that think she's different, and they'll accept whatever brutality she exhibits, whatever horrible policies she puts forward, like Gaddafi. She was on the leading edge of seeing Gaddafi die. Do you remember what she said when they slaughtered Gaddafi in the street in North Africa? We came, we saw, he died. The government doesn't care any longer whether you're white or black. Corporate world is probably the least racist world I've ever had any experience in. And I can put it in a different context. They hate everybody. Why do you think the corporate world is so willing to move its facilities to Mexico, India, Pakistan, China? They don't care who builds the material. The repressive corporate regime is the most repressive regime on earth. Corporatism in Italy was called fascism. Corporatism in America is called corporate governance. Corporate world did not have a problem bringing in Obama using Goldman Sachs money and telling him to stand by and watch blacks, Hispanics, everybody pretty much lose the Constitution and civil rights, no matter who you are. Obama went along with it no differently than Hillary will, Jeb Bush will, and George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr. did in the past. They know exactly what they're doing, and they don't care whether they utilize a black man to do it a Mexican, and they won't care if it's a gay or a lesbian that does it. Whatever it takes, the corporate world will do it. And it's the most repressive regime on earth. Why do you think Mussolini and Hitler modeled their state on a newly developed system called fascism? Fascism, by definition, is corporazione. It's by definition corporatism. It is the use of the corporate for-profit model to literally, you will incur the wrath of that model at the state level. Nothing like it has ever existed on earth, and that's why it was necessary to stamp it out by 1945. Well, guess what? It's back. And it doesn't give a damn if you're white, black, green, pink, gay, yellow. You could be an alien from Zeta Reticuli. You get in the corporate world's way, they will crush you. And if they want to use black people to crush white people, they'll use that. If they want to use green people from Zeta Reticuli to crush all of us, they'll do that. We need to understand what this new regime is, because it doesn't give a damn about race, color, and creed. We're over there killing and bombing a thing called ISIS, which never existed before on the planet. It's an acronym that has no meaning to me as a terrorism expert. It was created by the CIA, Mossad, in Jordan. It was funded by them to offset Hezbollah's power and to be used in Syria so we could accomplish the getting rid of Assad of Syria. But while we're bombing them in Iraq, Israeli businessmen are going into Iraq, buying up the land and the businesses. So this phenomenon takes place all the time in the middle of the chaos, and money always floats to the top. It always ends up about money. That's what we'll never understand as human beings, not black human beings or white human beings. We're not getting the point that Friedrich Nietzsche tried so hard to make. This is about the will to power, and this is about money. And
is this why we see that Africa...
You'll always be distracted by what's taking place, that there's other causal relationships involved. You'll think that's the sole focus. In the end, there's only one thing going on in our country right now, and that is power, and who's going to wield that power, where that money goes, and where it stays. This country has not seen any direct investment from its corporate world, by 80% a decline. No investment domestically here at all. They're taking the money, slicing it up in dividends and shareholders and bonuses, and the rest of it's going overseas as tax, without paying taxes, overseas profit.
Good morning, Mr. Hewitt. Good morning as well. I really appreciate the what I recognize as your honesty. And I have for years recognized that there are at least two Americas. And it's almost disheartening to hear well-meaning people who could know better by studying history and seeing how this society, which now is a global society, actually works, and being able to at least see their place in it. There may be times when we don't have the options available to us to effectively combat the society, but human nature is a very strange animal, if you will, and people have a will to survive more than anything. And so, I'm for over 40 years, I've never voted, I just don't have any. Never did I have any real reason to think that a single vote or ballot cast would change the condition of people, when that has never been the way that the condition of people have changed. But Americans, black, white, and everything in between, believe that. And I'm so glad to hear you say that the Bill of Rights literally doesn't exist. And it hasn't existed for some time. And so when people say, well, we still have our First Amendment rights, we still got the right to this, you don't have any rights that you can't force yourself to affect. And so I think if I have a question in here, it's about security, I should say privacy, because Edward Snowden's revelations were, to me, tumultuous in the way that they let it be known that people literally have nothing that is not known by the government. You think because you got a password on your email or a password on your Facebook or a password on your phone that you're the only one that accesses it, when those global communication companies like AT&T and Verizon, they're in bed with the government. They are the major corporations communications, intercepting communications has always been priority in any war. And that's what you have described, at least that's what I've understood you to describe, is that there's a war on humanity being waged by people whose morals and values are not human. And so if you could talk a bit about the surveillance, the reality of privacy or the lack thereof, I think it would add a bit to your conversation. And I really do appreciate your candor and your honesty. Thank you.
Well, he couldn't be more right. The chairman of the board of Google meets 3 times a week with Obama. And, I've said this before, Carl. When Obama leaves office, he will walk into becoming the richest black man on earth. Not the richest American, the richest black man on earth. And you watch. He'll travel the world and speak as a black man for black rights. When the fact of the matter is, for the last 8 years, he doesn't give a damn about the black community. He doesn't give a damn about anything except himself. And he is in the power, in the grip of the ideology of corporatism. Now, what this man the caller just suggested, Edward Snowden's revelations, he's dead on correct. Nothing in the world. I know there's legislation out there, EFF, there's the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the ACLU. Everybody's trying to turn back the NSA threat, turn back CIA surveillance, turn it down, cybersecurity, but somehow, get the government out of telecommunications, the Internet, Facebook. I got news for it. It's going the opposite way. I don't read that material. I read the material that demonstrates it's going the opposite way. I've got a new article from Defense One that Special Forces is now logging in every morning to Facebook to put your butt under surveillance. And that's the way it's going to continue. Nothing is going to stop the surveillance state until it gets to the point that it's utterly, people will wake up in the morning and realize that they have to have papers in hand, like a driver's license, only it'll have every single aspect. A biometric determinant of your life will be in your hand, and when they stop you, you better have it in your possession. And I'm sorry to say this again, but I have to stress this. If whites and blacks and Hispanics don't get together on this, we're doomed. If you actually believe black people have a special dispensation and a black problem greater than the Hispanic or the white problem, if you're poor, white, then you're mistaken. This is a people problem. And I understand what's happened to the black community more than most people could possibly imagine. I'm one of those white guys that got my nose right smack in the middle of it during the riots, during the 60s. And when I got in the middle of it, when there was whites pounding on blacks, I had 2 words. And when they heard me yell them, they listened. Those words were, that's enough. Because I came in swinging if they didn't stop. When I fight for civil rights, I will do whatever it takes. But do not mistake me for the white man coming into L.A. Like when I gave lectures during the L.A. riots, it was on Arsenio Hall. I went to South Central High School and gave a lecture during the riots, when nobody else white would even go down into South Central. Sean Penn and I went down with a half a dozen other white Hollywood types. I'm sorry I had to go down with white Hollywood types. They're the only ones that would sponsor me for their own publicity. But when I got down there, every black woman stood up in the audience and said, we do not need no white man to come down here and tell us in the black community what's going on. Every black woman said that. Not one black man said that. The black men all stood up and said, welcome, brother. We could use your help, too. But I damn near got run out of South Central High School by the black women that didn't want to hear anything a white man had to say. And I'm sorry, if that's the way it's going to be lived out, then this country is doomed, because the only salvation, the only possible hope is that blacks, Hispanics, and whites get together and stop the corporatism of our government taking away everything that matters in this nation. We will be a third world country.
Some people think we already are. 800-450-7876. Get you, Craig Hill. Let's keep moving. Let's go to line 1. Charles is joining us from D.C.
This is I'm an ex-veteran, and I understand you very clearly because, I experienced my war situation for 3 years, fighting for all our lives. And I agree with you about they got to have an open mind, man. Most of the white guys that I was in the war with, they got killed. A white guy saved my life in a Hummer. You know what I'm saying? A bomb explosion. I lost my toes, but I was thinking that way, naive. You know what I mean? So some people got to have an open mind. And I'm going to tell you about another thing. When I was at Aberdeen Proving Ground, since you know about military, you know, they got top secret clearance and people don't know this. They keep saying to me, Chuck, you're crazy. They talking about a conspiracy. They don't understand. We got to have an open mind. We got to get away from that color thing. We got to unite because this is the beast we're dealing with. You know what I'm saying? The beast don't care.
Can I interject something? I have to. I trained at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. That was more I changed my MOS. Man.
Yeah, I was 11 Bravo, but when I was 11 Bravo, Special Forces trained us because what happened in Vietnam. You know what I'm saying? We was trained by them. So I can feel you, man. I had lost some white friends.
Charles, in D.C., do you have a question for Craig?
Well, Mr. Craig, I'm sure you've probably heard of this, too. Now, you heard of doomsday preppers and survivalists, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now, what caught my eye with these people, a lot of people thought I was a nut since I got out the service, right? But they kind of like, it's gradually, by them losing their jobs and they going through these turmoils, they say, well, this man's not crazy that we think he is. But like I say, why would people be a prepper and a survivalist? Now, you know about the EMP, electromagnetic pulse, right?
Yes.
Economic.
In fact, I brought it to Carl's show, the training facilities that are being set up throughout the nation. Yes.
Right. Okay, now, let me ask you something. Majority of these cats who are preppers and survivors, there's only a handful of blacks and other is involved, but the majority is white. Some would say, well, God put common sense in certain people here that say, why? I'm looking at the numbers. They're growing from 20 million strong. Why are you not? They're not buying cars. They buying bunkers. They're learning survival training, hand-to-hand combat.
Right. You know, Charles, can you step it up? Because we got a bunch of folks who got questions for Craig.
I just want you to know that the people need to wake up because they got to get away from that color.
All right, I'll tell you what. Let me put in a question for him because somebody tweeted a question kind of similar to what Charles is trying to get out. And it says, can you ask your guest how best to get off the radar in this society, having what you said about the NSA, and what essential tools and supplies should people stockpile?
There's no place left to hide. It's too late. You can't evade it any longer. There's nothing you can do. The Pentagon just issued their new smartphones that can't be hacked by the NSA, but they're issued secretly out of Switzerland, and the founder of the corporation is an ex-Navy SEAL, and that smartphone is only going to be in the hands of the Pentagon and Pentagon personnel. So they could be off the radar from NSA surveillance. But you and I, nothing. There's nothing you can do. My recommendation to my client base, which is made up of blacks, whites, Hispanic, Asian, Puerto Rican, Vietnamese, and a lesbian or two, all I can tell you is what I tell them. Get out of debt. Have 6 months supply of food for you and your family in your home, and don't tell everybody about it. Keep it to yourself. And I believe in the Second Amendment because when things go bad, the government tends to let them run their course, like in Louisiana, New Orleans. They kind of tend to back off and let the gangs and the criminals take over. So if you're running away, you're probably taking with you jewelry and coin. At least have sense enough to have a gun with you because there's people sitting out there going, I know exactly where people are going when they leave their home, where they're headed. There'll always be that evil element of criminality out there. They're the ones that always benefit from chaos. So, but that's the limit of my recommendation is to protect yourself from the criminal element when things go bad. But to protect yourself from the government element, the real threat against the people of the United States, well, right now we have no protection. He's right. Most preppers are white. Most survivalists are white. But in the inner city, I know a lot of black vets have gotten together very quietly, and they're preparing for that day. But what I don't want to see is whites against blacks. That would serve the interests of the United States government perfectly. Mexicans against blacks, Mexicans against whites. That would serve the government's interest perfectly until we get off of the race kick and realize that the government does not care about race the way you do. It's about control and power. And they'll put a bullet in you whether you're black, white, or Mexican.
All right, 800-450-7876, line 2. Jay's joining us from Louisiana. Jay, you're on with Craig Hulet.
Good morning, Carl. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yes, great show, Carl, and I want to let you know that we listen here in Louisiana. We greatly appreciate your show and all the valuable information you offer. Listen, I want to pose this question to your guest, Mr. Hewitt. Carl, we've been having a lot of issues with law enforcement in our area in this part of Louisiana. And one of the same jurisdictions where Victor White died in the backseat handcuffed, they want to say he committed suicide, a couple of years earlier. And I posted this video where we saw government deploy what I think Mr. Hewitt might agree with me, a special weapon experiment in the sense that they use a siren sounding device, and I would like to think it's the LORAD device, the long-range acoustic device. And with that said, Mr. Hewitt, how dangerous is that, those type of weapons, and is that weapon legal? And what are the long-term effects on using that on a crowd? Because they use it in a black neighborhood after a certain event, and the kids wasn't doing anything, but they just wanted these kids to leave the area, and these kids were playing their music. So they turned up, and we thought it was sirens, and we went back and looked, and we started doing some research, and we figured that was the long-range acoustic device. So I'd like to get his answer off air. And again, Brother Carl, thank you so much for all what you do. We're listening here in Louisiana. Thank you.
Yes, they're using acoustic devices, non-lethal acoustic weapon systems. Yes, they are. Ferguson, they deployed them there. People caught on to it quickly, and the head of the State Patrol, who was quickly put in charge of Ferguson, he removed that weapon from usage. But prior to his arrival on the scene, it had been deployed. I saw pictures of it. I know what the weapon does. It sends a signal that's a high-pitched signal that if you don't get out of the way of it expeditiously, it can destroy your hearing. They're not lethal. They can't kill you, but they can destroy your killing. The electromagnetic pulse weapons that they've deployed in Afghanistan and used, and they today still say that they're safe. The companies that make them say they're safe. They're deploying them in the military bases. They are having them set up in military bases to be used in civil disturbances. They withdraw those weapons, those non-lethal weapons, because when they deployed them in Iraq, they, in fact, killed Iraqis.
Craig, before you came on, Dick Gregory was saying that Homeland Security has purchased a lot of the ammunitions out there, and there's actually a shortage of ammunition. And you said that prior to that the government was buying up a lot of supplies, weaponry, and using some that they weren't using overseas.
Yeah, it's not just Homeland Security. It's every department and agency, from the Federal Reserve System to the Department of Education, Forestry, Wildlife. All of them now have police forces, armed officers, and all those agencies have put in requisitions for millions of rounds of ammunition. Okay, it's CraigBHulet.com, CraigB as in Bravo, Hulet, Hulet, CraigBHulet.com. On that website, scroll down on the first page as far as you can. There's a Homeland Security document I think everybody ought to read. It's a recent document, 2014, I believe is the date, and it discusses civil disturbances and domestic terrorism. And all I can say is, unless you're sheep, you're listed as a threat to Homeland Security. I mean, everybody's listed. If you have food storage, you're listed. If you're a patriot, you're listed. If you're a white patriot, you're considered an extremist and a threat to the government. But it doesn't matter what. If you believe in anything adamantly, you're a threat to the government. The list is absolutely hysterical, but you should read it for yourself so you'll understand why I argue that this government has no special interest in repressing just black people. This government has a special interest in repressing every living soul in this domestic population, and that's why H.R. 399 is such a misguided piece of legislation. If you haven't heard about it, I'll get to that. But you already asked me another question I'll answer.
Yeah.
Every agency,
why? Yeah. These other agencies, why they stockpiling weapons?
Every agency in the federal government has been told you will now have a law enforcement arm. What the Department of Education, what is the USDA, meat inspectors, why do they have to have a law enforcement arm? Why does the Federal Reserve System? Well, that's kind of explanatory because it's the banking system. They've got their own, basically a military arm. All funded by your taxpayers' dollars, all trained by special forces in the military, SWAT teams included. They're buying up ammo, millions of rounds of ammo. Homeland Security just bought 65 million rounds of .223 ammo, which coincidentally was exactly the ammo that Obama tried to ban, saying that was armor-piercing, which it is not. 65 million rounds. It's going to take them 5 years to collect that much. But that's how great a threat the American people are to the federal government, in their opinion. You and I are the only threat to the United States government because the United States government does not represent the electorate. Your vote is meaningless. Money puts these people in power, and the people in power, all of them, are civilian contractors, no different than Blackwater. You need to look at it differently. The senators and congressmen, Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Jeb Bush are civilian contractors, which they will collect $1 billion, up to $2 billion or $3 billion necessary to put the next president in the White House. Who do you think he works for? The people that voted or the people that put up $3 billion?
What do they expect for that $3 billion?
Obedience to the corporate regime. It's called a global regime of economic interdependence. Its ideology is corporatism. I don't say these things because it's my opinion. I'm telling you what they call themselves. I'm an analyst and a researcher, and I've worked within the confines of the Congress and the government and federal law enforcement. I understand them as what they are, who they are. I don't agree with anything they do. I've done nothing but oppose it, even while consulting on an issue that I've been contracted on. They know I don't agree with what the government's doing. They know exactly who I am out here. But I'm telling you what they think. I'm not telling you what I think. I'm trying to explain to you what this government thinks of you and what they intend to do to you in the future. H.R. 399 is such a misguided piece of legislation, and it will pass the House and the Senate if somebody doesn't wake up to it. It's called Borders First Act. Borders first. Secure our borders first. And it will allow Homeland Security, Border Patrol, and Customs to lock down a 100-mile inward from the ports, from the Pacific, Atlantic Oceans, Mexican border, and Canadian border. They'll be able to lock down a 100-mile radius area all the way around this country. They're going to build more fences. There's going to be biometric stops, and they will be able to deploy U.S. military personnel at will to, quote, secure our border. They refer to it under a new definition under the Homeland Security as operational control. Homeland Security will have operational control throughout the entire United States border regions. Now, I realize some people, like the San Diego white trash, they hate Mexicans. They don't want to see any Mexicans crossing the border, period. But they're a racist group. Well, they're going to be in favor of this. What they don't understand is what our government is doing under this securing of our border is locking us in. not keeping someone out.
Oh. Craig, before I take another call, I had a tweet question for you. Wanting to know Eric Holder. They understand he's now back in corporate America. Do you have any information on that?
He is back in corporate America, and he's got a lot of credentials to go with him because he had a level of security clearance. He again, is going to be a very wealthy black man, just like, every other attorney general that left, like Edwin Meese, became a very wealthy white man. Yeah, they'll go rotate right into corporate America. I don't anticipate knowing for probably a year where he lands, because he'll probably do the lecture circuit and get something like $1 million a lecture by every elite institution that's courting him. But, yeah, he'll be back in the corporate world just like everybody else. Where do you think Obama's headed when he leaves the White House? The corporate world. He'll start with Google. Google will hire him, and he'll get shares straight up front. And he will go and he will do like Bill Clinton. He'll walk around, go to the United Nations, and he'll talk to black nations when, in fact, he's the first black president in America that removed one of the best black leaders in North Africa that was working for the black interests of an African nations, all 9 nations. He was the chairman of the African Union, Muammar Gaddafi, a friend of Nelson Mandela. It was a black president and a white State Department head named Hillary that saw to it that man was removed, because he gets in the way of AFRICOM seizing control of all of the African continent, AFRICOM being a Pentagon footprint.
Right, and we get into
That's
that.
what Obama did in North Africa.
Carl Nelson on 1450 WOL.
I thank you folks for staying with us, and I guess Craig Hulet. Again, the number to call to speak to Craig, 800-450-7876. Go back out to Will on line 2 in Prince George's County. Will?
Yes, I'm going to make it real quick. I want to thank you guys, Dick Gregory, you, Carl Nelson, and Greg Hewitt. Everything you've been saying, I heard it since I was a kid, man. I had to pull my truck over to the side. You would put a spark in me. You actually woke me up. There's a lot of folks out here, man, that's walking around, don't understand a thing you all saying. I say the same thing to them about what's going on, and they look at me like I'm crazy. Even on my job, they kind of like blackball me because they're like, he's crazy, he's tripping. But I know it and see exactly what's going on. I want to thank you for you, man. And so me and another guy, man, that we got our weapons together. We don't talk that much. One time all the lights went off in my neighborhood. Everybody come to my house for survival skills and how to live to make it that one night. You understand? And I need your name. How do you spell your name again and go to your website?
Craig with a C, CraigBHewitt.com.
And I want to thank y'all, man. I'm telling y'all, it's happening. I see it every day. And you know something? It's
Thanks,
like
Will. Thanks for your call.
one other thing. Like you said, white, black, Spanish, we all got to get together, because what they're doing is they try, like you said, and trap us all in like a little mouse maze, and they don't try to play us or work us. They want to kill each other, kill each other at the same time, while they come in, like you said, the corporate world, and just walk through it and change the whole environment.
A new documentary by Bob Cohen and Eric Nadler. It's on a website called Who, What, Why, and it's about AFRICOM's war on Libya. It's just a short documentary, won't take much of your time, but in a very concise manner, they have revealed what I've been arguing since day one. Gaddafi was targeted to be gotten rid of because he was a chairman of the African Union. He was serving in the capacity and stamped approved by Nelson Mandela. He was going to bring the 9 nations of North Africa together in the United States of Africa. He was going to issue a currency. He had the infrastructure, the oil, the money. He was funding all of it with Libyan oil money. And he was going to bring the means to take all of that arable land and the water and the raw materials in Africa and bring them through Libya. Go look at a map. Do your demographics, please. Look at a map. He would have created a system by which all those raw materials could have flowed through Libya into the Mediterranean ports, deep water ports, and he would have built the United States of Africa.
Yeah, and that was the dream that they tried to distill, the United States of Africa. You know, you talked about the oil situation. That's why a lot of American troops are in those countries in the Middle East. It's all about oil. But is there a move to take the dollar out? Is there a move to remove the dollar as the standard currency for trade?
Yes, there is. The BRICS combination of 11 nations under Putin and China, The BRICS is the equivalent of an IMF. But they are underfunded. They have nowhere near the financial clout of the IMF or the World Bank or any of the banks, the interim banks that flow down from the World Bank and the IMF. But there is an effort. China and Putin now are trading without petrodollars. Venezuela is doing the same. In fact, everywhere we mess with somebody, Putin manages to pop up and make a deal with them. But it is exactly those kinds of deals. I think the final straw with Muammar Gaddafi is he threw Bechtel out of Libya. He canceled a $1 billion contract to build the infrastructure in Libya to assist in the United States of Africa through the African Union. I think it's probably fairly accurate to say that when you do that to Bechtel, you're probably on a hit list, because it was shortly after that he was removed. And by the way, when he was removed, there were no violations of human rights like Hillary Clinton said. She lied. She went public and completely lied about Libya and Gaddafi and what was going on in that country. In fact, I was on an airplane flying to L.A., reading Foreign Affairs Journal, and the article was praising the award the United Nations was giving to Muammar Gaddafi, and everybody from our government was there applauding him as one of the finest leaders, leading the way, leading Africa into the new world. He was loved and respected and honored at the United Nations. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he's violating human rights of his own people. We, American pilots, flew the French jet for NATO. We bombed him into the Stone Age and saw that he was murdered in the streets. We have become a government that I do not see representing me or the American people. I know what they represent in the corporate world, and it's bloody as hell. And if the American people don't wake up to it and realize that this election, especially this coming election with a Clinton and a Bush in the race, makes us the mockery of every third world country.
Do you see those two in the finals?
Yes, because they're going to get all the money. Not because the people want them. Your vote doesn't matter one whit. If you want to be a Democrat and vote for Hillary, or because you're a woman and she has Hooters, vote for her. I don't care. But if you think she's going to change anything and she's any different, then I would advise you to look at that video I just described, because at the end of it, you see her cheering and making the statement, "We came, we saw, he died." And look at how she behaves in this video when the murder of an African leader goes down while she's serving a black president. And you tell me what she's going to do for the black people of America.
That's the question.
I want to know, is he familiar with it was just on the news, too, about the Operation Jade Hem 15 military exercises that's supposed to be conducted from July the 15th to September the 15th of this year in 6 or 7 states. And I'll hang up and listen because I know you're about to go off. Thank you.
That's come up now on 4 different interviews that I've done this past week, that very question. How you track these things is, I have a guy that has I don't know how he does it. He's my tech guy, but he sends me through some kind of application everything that happens out there on a daily basis with Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush, and one of the things that he tracks are these kinds of military exercises. So initially, we saw them taking place and being scheduled for Des Moines, Flagstaff, Arizona, San Diego, but then as we kept looking into it, it's basically nationwide. It's a domestic terrorism exercise put on by a joint task force of Homeland Security, the military bases involved nearest those communities, and everybody within the fusion centers, including SWAT teams, special forces. And these exercises they're not live fire exercises, but they are very aggressive exercises that will go on.
Hold that thought right there, Craig, because we've got to step aside.
Okay.
We've got some announcements to make. I'll let you finish up on that Operation Jade Helm that Abby's talking about from St. Louis. Let's go back to Craig and Abby's question about Operation Jade Helm.
The exercise is directed at civil disturbances and domestic violence, and they're going to go on for 2 weeks in every corner of the United States. Most people won't hear about it except in their local news. Like I said, we first started hearing about it. It was a report from Des Moines, then Flagstaff, San Diego, but it is a nationwide exercise of Homeland Security in conjunction with the fusion centers. And this is directed at an active exercise in addressing civil disturbances. All I can do is I just keep telling people, please look at the Homeland Security document that designates who is a threat to the United States domestically, and you're on the list. If you've got a mouth and you're not happy with something, whether you're a white patriot, a prepper, a survivalist, or if you're a Black Panther, or if you're with an activist group that's on the left, environmental, you're all on the list. We're all on the list. We're the enemy. And
where's that list? Where can we see that list?
It's on the front page of my website. There's a PDF file. Refer to it under the Homeland Security's documents on extremism here in America.
And the website again?
CraigBHulet.com. Hulet.
Leon tweeted, and he's bugging because he asked this question before you even came on, so I got to ask you. He wants to know about TPP. Says he hasn't heard anything. Has it been passed? Have they thrown it out? What's the deal?
No, it's still being negotiated. It's about to be settled. It'll probably pass within the next month. There's no opposition. It's still held as top secret. It gives the corporations of the world, the multinational corporations that make up the global regime of economic interdependence that I talk about, it gives those corporations the power under the definition that was an old CIA definition called national treatment. National treatment is defined as a corporation being treated in every country as an equal to the citizen of that country with the right to sue the government as an individual. Embedded in the TPP, what has been snuck out and released through WikiLeaks and Snowden, what little bit we do know is that these corporations are vying for the ability to sue nation states. In other words, taxpayers, you and I, would have to pay for the settlement if they don't make a profit.
Wow. Where's the Obama administration on all this?
That's how far ahead they think.
Craig, the Obama administration, is the president, is this something he said he would sign if it hits his desk?
Yes. Yes, he'll sign
it. And the reason being?
He's keeping it secret.
Repeat that? He's keeping a secret?
Obama is the one that is keeping it locked up as a top secret document, and one of the lobbyists for TPP told Elizabeth Warren openly, the U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, he said, well, look, we're keeping it secret because if the American people ever knew about it, they would oppose it.
So at this point, is nothing the American people can do? Is it out of our hands?
No, it's out of. It's not even in the hands of Congress. Most of them haven't even seen the document or read it. They won't be given a chance to read it when they're told to vote on it, and they'll be told to vote on it by whoever funded their campaign. Just like the Multilateral Agreement on Investment, just like the World Trade Organization was passed in the dead of night, just like the Patriot Act was passed when not one congressman or senator had an opportunity to read it. Because they're not really representing anybody. They're told what to do. Now, on gay marriage, they may stand up and say, I'm for it, and someone else might say, I'm against it. That's because it's issues that don't matter to the global regime. On issues that matter, they have no say, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican. That's why nothing changes, no matter how the House and the Senate changes and in whose hands. TPP will pass in its entirety with all the abusive measures. There will be no cybersecurity bill that protects Americans from the invasion and invasiveness of NSA snooping and wiretapping and emails and telephone conversations. I'm trying to explain to the American people. I've been doing this almost 40 years. I used to say, vote, do this, go here, get involved. That's what I used to say. Now I can't lie. It's over.
If it's, Craig, what do? We just sit around and just take it?
You get angry, you get involved in organizations, but first of all, I hate to have to say this, we don't have enough citizens that are well-informed enough to do a damn thing. We just aren't a well-informed people any longer. 1 in 5 families don't even look for work anymore. 20% of the population aren't even looking for work. 100 million are unemployed and not looking for work. Marijuana is going to be legalized nationwide. And when you do that to the American people who are basically unemployed, what's the next step? My guess is we're going to start hearing under Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush that every single American over the age of 18 deserves $1,000 a month, like they're doing in Finland. And the American people will roll over, go to sleep, smoke dope, play video games, and look at pornography and listen to music all day long.
Wow. That's a sad scenario that's on the horizon. How soon will we see these changes take place?
Over the next 10 years, like I said, it's a paradigm shift. These things are paradigm shifts, but you don't feel them until it's too late.
Up until this September, Washington had the revolution in Libya checked as a foreign policy victory for President Obama. After all, the U.S. provided most of the firepower, which led to the capture and the killing of the Libyan leader.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.